Hello everybody, today's May 1st, 2012. Well, we rounded out April with a nice little debt auction and sold 70 billion in bonds. And it brings the national debt now to $15.69 trillion. Some of you may pay attention to this, others of you may not. It's a huge problem, and I think it's important to pay attention to because eventually it's going to lead to huge inflation, in my opinion. We're going to reach, sort of like if you have a credit card, you got a credit limit. Well, there's not really a stated credit limit for the United States, but when people won't loan to us anymore because they know they're not going to be paid back, which I don't know why they don't know that now, but at some point, other countries aren't going to want to loan to us anymore, and then we'll reach our credit limit. And then the Fed will probably step in and just do all the lending. And we know them; they got a lot of reserves, right, over at their Federal Reserve. They're the the Federal Reserve. They got all the reserves over there. They just type zeros into the computer, and there's the reserves. They're going to be doing lots of printing of money electronically. To keep the United States operational. So that's why, when the question of default comes up, reminds me of Ben Bernanke saying, we have a technology called a printing press, so there's no worry of not being able to pay our bills. U.S. can pay its bills. There's no worry about that. All the U.S. citizens out there watching this clip, don't worry, we can always pay our bills. And you can always count on inflation, which is a hidden tax that'll steal your wealth. And that's why we talk about gold and silver here. Gold and silver, the greatest hedges against inflation throughout history. They've proven to be the best inflation hedges. 20 cents to buy you a gallon of gas 50 years ago, buy you a gallon of gas now. That's 20 cents real money, real silver money. When gas is $7, $8 a gallon, those 2 dimes still going to buy you a gallon of gas. That's just why it's so important to hold silver and gold, and then there's all the other things that could just propel them even higher than what they're going to be just because of normal inflation. But this national debt thing is a huge problem. There's no plan of paying it off. Let's say we had a little plan, we're going to pay $500 billion a year for the next 30 years and work on paying it off. Well, how do we pay $500 billion towards it next year? First of all, we got to not have a deficit of $1.5 trillion. Got to do away with the deficit and then add $500 billion on top of that. So we got to find $2 trillion just to start paying $500 billion towards the national debt each year. Well, let's see. Last year we brought in about 2.4 trillion in revenue for the country in taxes. So might as well just double the amount of tax that every single person's paying, and then we might be able to start working on it. But we know that's not going to happen. And one of the biggest worries is a video I did a few weeks ago. It's got a big percent symbol if you want to look for that video. Talking about $1 trillion a year in interest payments. How easily we could get there. Because interest rates are extremely low right now. Historically low. And we're still paying $454 billion in interest on the national debt in 2011. So, a spike up. And a lot of this, I had someone arguing with me saying, well, this is all, got a bunch of 30-year bonds. They don't come due for 30 years. Yeah, well, I think it's 36% of the national debt is all short term. Rolls over the next couple years. So you'll roll over to those higher interest rates. Higher interest rates are going to just devastate us with the national debt. And the Fed says they're holding interest rates near zero for the next couple of years, so there's no worry of that. Well, interest rates are going to rise at some point. But by holding them down here, they're not encouraging anybody to save, encouraging people to speculate and just to spend more than they normally would. So whatever, it's all just getting so far out of whack. But I'm really surprised they've been able to create all the money they've created. And even though we have higher inflation, they're paying interest to the banks now to hold higher reserve amounts. So that money's not being multiplied tenfold, which is what the banks are good at doing with fractional reserve banking. So anyway, I want to tie this up. I want to talk about the national debt real quick. So we're at 101.5% of GDP. What that means is the debt just passed the total production of the entire country recently. And now we're at 101.5. And we're not alone. We've joined countries like Portugal, Italy, Greece, Iceland, and Ireland. They're all over 100% of GDP. Oh, and let's not forget Japan. They're over 200% of GDP. They owe twice as much as everything they produce in a year. So, where does this lead us? It just leads us into a devaluing of the U.S. dollar, which we're trying to deal with by holding real money. That's what we're doing here. There are other inflation hedges, but it's just so important to have some real money. If you don't have any real money, get yourself a couple silver coins, a couple gold coins. You got to start somewhere. But talking about the national debt, I wanted to say that the U.S. has had a national debt ever since the American Revolution. In 1791, we owed $75 million. But by 1834, we paid that down, almost totally off, to $33,000. We paid off 74 point something million dollars. And then the Civil War, war is very profitable business for the bankers. So they always want to get us into wars, even if they have to fund both sides of the war. So the Civil War, we went from like 65 million up to 2 billion national debt. And World War I added like 24 billion. And then it just keeps going along the line. But there was another time we paid down the national debt, which is something that's unheard of nowadays. But we owed 16 billion in 1930. Now that's after World War I when it was like 26. So we paid off like $10 billion. And once World War II came, national debt just started climbing like crazy. Added a couple $100 billion. Vietnam War added like 600 billion. And then when we cut the tie with gold, money printing just started going nuts. Get into the Gulf War, you're talking trillions. And now we're just spending like $1.5 trillion more than we bring in every year. So just keep accumulating some gold and silver. That's our best way of, the average person probably says, I don't give a shit about this. I mean, what am I going to do about it? Our elected officials, they'll take care of it. Yeah, they'll take care of it. They're doing such a great job over there. They put together a group to try and cut it by cut $1 trillion out of the national debt over like the next 10 years. They couldn't come to any type of agreement. The super committee that we had the end of last year. What a joke. Man, just expect the national debt to just continue to climb when interest rates go up. Watch out.